Thank you. Hey, good morning. We invited all juniors and seniors down. This is our annual Distinguished Alumni Inauguration. The pictures that hang on the wall outside the auditorium are our former recipients, and today we're going to add 2 more members. So, just to tell you briefly how the day goes, Mr. Richard Gaudette, who worked at David Prouty High School for 45 years. He retired in 1997. He's going to come up and give you a brief history of how this whole organization got started. And then he will introduce the 2 recipients and we'll be finished. So without further ado, Mr. Gaudette, please come.
You people are fortunate to have such a wonderful assistant principal. This guy is, in my book, outstanding. Just to tell you something about me, I'm a Spencerite from way back, born and brought up in this town, and because of that, I'm a Prouty alum. I graduated from David Prouty in 1948. Can anyone figure out how many years ago that was? We'll let you work on that. And oddly enough, I didn't want to be a teacher. I wanted to be a dentist. And when I went to college, I was a pre-med, hoping to go to dental school. But because of a variety of reasons, that never happened. And I was invited by the then superintendent, Mr. McDonough, to come and substitute for the chemistry and science teacher who had gotten married and was on his honeymoon. So I took his classes for a week, after which Mr. McDonough said, I'm going to need 2 more teachers in my system right now. If you want to, the job is yours. That's when I started. And I stayed here 45 years. Now, for someone who didn't want to be a teacher, that's pretty good. But I loved it. And during those 45 years, obviously, met an awful lot of students. And some of the students are outstanding. And there was a former teacher, Vic Tolis, who taught math and science here for many years, and then became a principal. And there was a man by the name of Dick Prouty, who served on the school committee for many years. Well, Dick Prouty and Vic Tolis got together and came up with the idea of this distinguished alumni program. And it started, they would pick out 1 person per year, and I think they did this for 9 years, and honor that 1 person as being a very accomplished alum from David Prouty. And then, for whatever reason, and I'm not clear as to what the reason was, the program stopped. I don't know if it was because of a change of school administration or what it was, but it stopped for about 8 or 9 years. And then a fellow that I had as a student sold a company that he had formed for $270 million. And I thought to myself, that's pretty impressive. Guy graduated from Prouty, started a company, and just sold it for $270 million. So I decided this guy deserved to be recognized as a distinguished alum. So I brought the program back And at the time, Dr. Hicks was superintendent of our school system. And so I asked permission from Dr. Hicks to restart the program. And he gave me permission. And since I restarted the program, we do 2 people a year. And it's been 10 years now that I've been doing this. So not only did I teach here 45 years, I've been doing this for 10 years. It's like I can't leave. In any event, that's the history behind the Distinguished Alumni Program. And over the entrance to the auditorium, you've probably seen the pictures under the caption, Distinguished Alumni. It's quite a group. People who are, some are college presidents. One fellow was in the Navy until he was a 2-star admiral. And his father was a custodian here. And he was the only child. But think of what he accomplished in life. So this is the type of thing that we're trying to keep going, because a lot of good people have graduated from David Crowley High School. This morning, we have 2 outstanding alums. Mary Baker Wood, who's been the town librarian for a number of years, and Louis O'Coin. Now, these 2 are young enough that I had them as students. And the sad part is they had me as a teacher. I had Mary as a counselee when I was guidance director and tried to get her into a good school, and it didn't work out, but she did go on to college and did survive. Louis I had as a science student when he was a freshman. I had him in French 1 when he was a sophomore, and he went on to big and better things. And he's an outstanding attorney. So these are the people that we're going to honor today. And I think Louis is going to start the process. So Louis is going to speak first. Louis O'Coin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Godet.
Brings back such great memories as you're talking about that. And I want to tell you, I was in the first class that ever graduated from this school, so that was pretty exciting. I remember what it was like for us when we first came here, and everything was so brand new and modern, and it was really fun. Seems to be holding up well. I spent the first 3 years at the old school. So what I thought I would do with you this morning is just to give you as succinct a summary of my career as I can. It's been a kind of long and winding path, so I'll try to be brief, and then I think perhaps what might be more important is just to see if you have any questions, because my goal here is, if any of you have similar interests of any kind, I'd like to even explore that with you, and certainly if I can be a source of motivation for you in any way, I'm happy to do that. So when I first, I remember, you say that you taught me that French 1, Mr. Godet, and that ended up being, French ended up being a very important part of my life, which is kind of an interesting thing, because at the time people were saying, why would you want to study language? It's, not very important. So I thought maybe in telling you a little bit about my career, I think I'll start from where I am right now and then, work back a little bit. Right now, I'm a professor at Tufts University in a very special school, which is called the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. And we have students that come from all over the world. It's really exciting. Very top-notch students. Some of them are diplomats already themselves, and they come for this very specialized degree at the Fletcher School. And I teach them law courses. I teach a course in comparative law. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what else I teach as we go along. And they also study, some of them study international economics and business, and we have another group of students that studies diplomacy and history. And just to give you a sense of where I'm at in my career right now, also I will be leaving on Sunday to go off to the French-speaking country of Senegal in West Africa, where I'll be giving lectures on comparative law for the United States State Department. But as I was saying, it's a long road to get to this point. When I left David Prouty, I went to Holy Cross College nearby. And I remember at first, I kind of always knew that law was in my, it was my interest, and I thought, well, I better be a history major. And then I discovered that, wow, that wasn't so right for me. And then I just thought, I'm very passionate about French, and I decided to do what I wanted to do, and that was to study modern languages. And I studied French and Italian. I did have a minor in political science, but I think it's very important to do what you want to do, even if you don't know exactly where it's going to lead, in the beginning. So then after, I did what today you would call a gap year. I took a year off after Holy Cross, and that was kind of good. In the sense of that I took a very kind of what I thought was an ordinary kind of job, 9-to-5 job in an insurance company, the Paul Revere Life Insurance Company in Worcester, and that showed me that was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and gave me real motivation to go on. And then I did fulfill my dream of going to law school. So I went to Boston College Law School. One of the things that just comes to mind as I'm telling you that, one of my classmates was John Kerry at the time, who I took classes with, and to see where he's gone on from here is quite an interesting thing. And then after law school, it was a real problem because I don't know if any of you hear about it or read about it, but there's a real crisis in the legal profession right now. People are graduating from law school and there are no jobs. It's a really very difficult period for lots of reasons that I could explain to you if you want to ask me about that. But the reason I'm mentioning that is because it was similar then. There was a real crisis. There were no jobs. It was very, very difficult. And for personal reasons, I decided to move to San Francisco, which didn't make it any easier because I was completely unknown in this new area. But I ended up, after some difficult searching, finding a job in the public defender's office in San Francisco, where I did a rather interesting thing, which was that I ended up representing the mentally ill, who in hearings that they would have about being committed for a year to a mental institution, et cetera. And that became kind of specialization during that period of my life. I became an expert in psychiatry and the law. But I knew that I always had this yearning to have an international career. And so at the time I applied for a Fulbright scholarship to go teaching abroad, and amazingly, I got this Fulbright. I think one of the reasons why is because in my capacity of as a lawyer representing mental patients, I had done a very important brief before the United States Supreme Court, and I think that was one of the achievements that caused the Fulbright Commission to decide to sent me to France. I got to teach at one of the top-notch law school in France. That was 1982, 1983. And what a wonderful experience that was. That was a life-changing experience. On my return from Senegal on this trip, I'll be going to Paris, where I have many friends, and I can maintain a constant contact with France because I've lived there now for a period of as much as 3 years in my life. And then when I came back from that experience, that was interesting. I ended up going overseas to get teaching credentials because I didn't get them here. And so after I came back with these teaching credentials, I was hired at Boston University Law School as a teacher. And that was wonderful. So I spent 15 years at Boston University, where I taught comparative law. In my days when I was in France for that year, I started to become very interested in how different the French legal system was from our legal system. Because, I had been to law school in the United States, and, we're all the same. I tell my students now when I teach comparative law, no matter where you are, you always think that the whole world, every other country has a legal system that's exactly like yours. That's just what you imagine, and it couldn't be further from the truth. Then I became very fascinated with that idea. And while I was living in France also, the American embassy started, they found out that I was in town and that I could speak French. So they started sending me to French-speaking countries in Africa to give lectures. And that's why I'm going to Senegal on Sunday, because to this day, the State Department every once in a while calls on me and says, would you go to Africa and give some lectures, because I can give them in French. So, but after teaching at Boston University for 15 years, I was always doing consulting work for the State Department, especially in countries that were in difficulty, post-conflict countries, and I would give advice on rebuilding their legal system, their judicial system, and part of the reason why I was able to do this was because I understand how law works in different cultures around the world. So I finally decided that that would be really good if I could teach my students about that and about the experiences that I've had in building legal and judicial systems in other countries. So that's part of what I do today. At the Fletcher School, I teach a course in comparative law where the students study about how law is different in many different countries. And I also teach this seminar which is called Rule of Law in Post-Conflict Societies. One of the main things that I've done in terms of help giving advice to countries that are in transition post-conflict is to be involved in helping them draft a new constitution. That's been really a wonderful experience for me. That started in 1993, where I was called upon to be an advisor in the country of Cambodia. The reason why they called on me for Cambodia is because Cambodia used to be, as many of you may know, a colony of France, and a lot of people were French-speaking. It would have been much better if I could have spoken their local languages, which is Khmer, but when you talk with the educated people in Cambodia, you can communicate with them in French. So you see again how helpful French has been for me all along the way. And by the way, many of you may know the name Aucoin, because I think it's a common name in Spencer, but when I'm in international circles, I say Aucoin, which is the right way to pronounce it in French. But when I came back from some of those international trips, I told my brother, I said, well, I'm calling myself Aucoin now. And he said, well, you're a snob, because I grew up as an Aucoin, and he always thinks of himself as an Aucoin. But anyway. So then, as I said, after about 15 years in academia, and I was teaching about how to do these things on the ground in post-conflict countries, and I just thought, I really have to get away and have some real life experience in this area if I'm going to continue to teach like that. So I took some time off from academia, and I went to work in Washington, D.C. at the United States Institute of Peace, which does a lot of this kind of work around the world in different countries. I also spent 1 year as an advisor to the Minister of Justice in the country of Haiti, because Haiti is a French-speaking country. And that really, of course, built my experience. Talk about real world. That was truly, because as many of you know, Haiti is a very difficult place. But I had a marvelous experience there, as difficult as it was sometimes and as challenging as it was. As I mentioned, I also ended up working in Cambodia on their constitution. Then I got a wonderful recognition of the work that I've been doing in international circles, which was in the year 2001. I was appointed by the Supreme Court of the United States to be a United States Supreme Court Fellow for 1 year, which was a marvelous experience. And they actually wanted me to continue some of the work that I've been doing, but to use the federal judiciary in my work. So I did a lot of work during that particular year in Rwanda. And I brought some federal judges over to Rwanda, and they had wonderful interchanges with the judiciary in Rwanda. I arranged for video conferences with the United States Supreme Court and the Supreme Court of Rwanda. That was so exciting when I look back on it. And after those experiences, then I thought, well, I'm ready to go back to academia. I didn't want to leave academia forever because I love teaching. And for me, the students are the best part of teaching, and I miss that a lot. So I started applying around to schools, and I was really very fortunate to be hired at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, where I am today. perhaps I don't think it's that well known within our local areas here, but in the international sphere and in UN circles, it's very well known. So I was extremely fortunate to be there, and I've been there now for 11 years. And I'm the academic director of a special program that we have at the Fletcher School, which is a master's program in international law. We call it an LLM program, which is just a short way of saying a master's degree in international law. And we're graduating now I was the founder of that program. We're now graduating our 5th class, and I was just with them. At the end of the year, we go away with the faculty and students go away to a resort and spend 3 days together where the students present their thesis to us, and it's a kind of nice end of year. So I'm coming directly this morning from the conference center where we were with our students, and it's wonderful to find myself at this stage of my life with this kind of career background, and I hope to continue teaching for some time. I don't have any plans on retiring in the near future because it's still, it's so stimulating to me. But I also like to keep, my hand in the field, as I'm trying to do with this, as I've mentioned, this trip to Africa that I'll be taking in a few weeks. So that's kind of a thumbnail sketch of what I've been up to in my life ever since I left David Prouty, and I have to say it all began here. I'm thankful to you, Mr. Gadet, for the launch you gave me. Not so much in science, I'm sorry to say, science hasn't been my forte. I worked hard when you were my teacher, but French, look at what it did for me, and it's still very, very important part of my life, and I thank you very much. Nice to meet you, Mr. Béchamp. It's great having the chat that we had beforehand, and I hope that we can continue and maintain some contact. So anyway, I don't want to bore you all for a long time with stories of my life. It isn't all about me. It's about you too. So I'm just wondering if perhaps you had any questions or thoughts, and I would really, love to give you any advice that I can about developing your career. Yes, sir. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, and it's fun. I love teaching about that because some things are so shockingly different. For one thing, one of the main differences is think about how we, in our country, when the Supreme Court issues a decision, we just all follow that decision. We're so respectful of the court, and we're very proud of our courts. And I've had to study about this because this is what makes some of the big difference. Part of that is because it goes way back to England in the common law, and in the early days of the common law in England, the courts were very protective of the people. So even in British culture, they have this, reverence and respect for the courts because the courts protected them. On the continent, in France, the judges were part of the aristocracy, and they were mean son of a guns because they defended the king, basically. And so the judiciary has always had a very bad reputation. And the judicial career was not terribly respected. Can you imagine? So different from us. And so as a result, we talk about in our system when the Supreme Court or even an ordinary court issues an opinion, that opinion creates a rule that we have to follow after. We say it's binding, That's not true in the French-style systems, which we call civil law systems. But the French system has influenced so many countries of the world because they had colonies, all over the world. So actually more countries of the world are influenced by that legal tradition, the Napoleonic legal tradition, than our own common law. I mean, many countries are influenced by the common law, but more are influenced by the civil law. So what counts in that country is the law that's adopted by Parliament. And, sometimes they've looked at us, I remember in former years, and they say, how can you give judges this power? They're not even elected officials, But it's changing. We're influencing them, and they're influencing us because we have, for example, in our country, I won't bore you with the details of this, but in the area of international commercial law, we're very much influenced by the way the French-style law is done, and we've adapted that so that we can communicate, in the commercial area with the rest of the world. But so one of the main differences is that they don't recognize the importance of judicial decisions to the same way that we do. Also, their approach to law is a really intellectual approach. So the legal scholars are they're the ones who are respected, not so much the judges, which is quite different from us. That's a great question. Other questions? Yes.
Like, who or what was the biggest influence on you to get you to the point where?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Like, who was the biggest influence on you to get you to the point where you are today, or what was the biggest influence on you?
What was the biggest influence on me? I think, well, I don't think I can point to one particular factor. I would mention a couple things, and that is that when I was here at David Prouty and I was in high school, I was very serious about my studies. And I knew that I wanted to go on and do something where I was going to have to use my brain. And so it was very, very important to me to, and it didn't win me a lot of friends in those days, but that was a very, significant thing. Then I would say, when I went to Holy Cross, I had a French teacher, a woman who was from Paris, and she was very sophisticated, had lived in many parts of the world, and she was a great influence on my life. And she's now 92 years old, and we're still really good friends. I speak to her every week on the phone, and she was a great influence in my life. So I would definitely mention her. Yeah. Yes?
When was the first time you knew that you were interested in law?
I knew it from a very early age. I remember you were mentioning Victor Tolis, Mr. Godet, and I was at Lake Street School when he was the principal there. And one day, he was a very kind man, and he was very nice to me. And I remember one day, he was the principal and he called me to the office, and I thought, oh my God, what have I done? And he said, Louis, you should be a lawyer. You have the skills to be a lawyer. You're good at speaking. You're good in, history and things that would relate to political science. You should be a lawyer. That really did influence me. I thought, well, I was very encouraged, and I took that seriously ever after that, And I have to say, just in terms of the kind of person that I was, I remember, when I went to college during the Vietnam period, and we were, of course, as you know, during that period, questioning everything. And I thought, I don't know if I want to go to law school and be like a corporate lawyer or something like that. And I certainly did not want to do that, and I didn't do that. I was very interested in human rights, for example, and that's, my career has always touched on human rights in one way or another. So that's how that came about. Good questions. Any more? Well, thank you very much for your attention. It's really fun to be back here with all these memories. Thank you, Mr. Goodell. Thank you.
May I have the microphone?
Yes,
One of the things, to me, that is humiliating is to have, obviously we have some regard for ourselves. We're doing a good job.
Do you have a pocket?
Then to produce a student who surpasses us by so much. I'm just in awe. Outstanding. Louis, you've done above and beyond. Anyway, next person is our town librarian, Mary Baker Wood.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say hello to a lot of familiar faces out here. Some of you I think I've known since you were in our story hour classes, and some of you to this day I still see in the library, and maybe sometimes I'm scolding you, but I'm still really glad to see you here today. I want to say, first of all, thank you to Mr. Gaudet, who has been a cheerleader and a supporter for a lot of us who he knew during his years here at Prouty. And also to Leo Coyne, who was a year ahead of me in high school, to Dr. Malvey, who came to this, to my husband and to my son Adam, who are here, because I browbeat them into it. So, first of all, I just wanted to say that I'm deeply honored. This is the kind of thing I don't think about as being distinguished alumni, but I am truly honored. I was a very proud graduate of the class of 1968. Again, I'll let you do the math, but it was very important to me when I was asked, actually when Mr. Gaudette called me, because I'm a librarian and an archivist and answer questions about Spencer history. When he first mentioned the award, I actually thought, oh, he needs me to look up an article or something. I was very touched when I found out he was calling for me. My family has a long history at Prouty. My parents went to Prouty. My husband went to Prouty. All 5 of my siblings went to Prouty. And my own children graduated, twins, in the class of 2010. And I know so many people who have gone out from here, and maybe that's what I want to say today. So many people have gone out from here and had amazing, successful lives, and it all started here at Prouty. We were asked to share with you, current students, a story of our path after graduation and to offer, hopefully, some meaningful advice. So here's the thing. I remember sitting in this same auditorium, listening to somebody standing up here who seemed impossibly old and thinking, I really have no interest. I'm too busy getting on with my life, and I don't even see a clock. And that same clock, we were watching it carefully. So I do promise you, I'm going to try to pay attention to the clock, and I will also hopefully tell you something interesting. I will say that I remember I could hardly wait to graduate from Prouty. I wanted to go out into the world. I wanted to go and live in places like Paris or London. I wanted to go away to school first. I was the oldest of 6 kids. Getting a dorm room of my own was my most immediate goal. But I was nonetheless ready to get out and make my life and to leave Spencer. Life has funny ways of catching up with you, and so I ended up back here, living in Spencer, doing lots of interesting things, I think, with my life, but in the end, this has been home. So standing here today is sort of coming full circle. And I, too, I was the second class to graduate from this high school. And you're right, it was bright and shiny when we were here. I was also sharing the fact that I went 2 years to what we called the original high school, the old high school. My own kids actually went to it, the old David Prouty High School. And my biggest regret in life was that I never got a chance to use the senior stairs at the old senior school. For those who remember the times, that's a true loss. The year I graduated from Prouty, the world was a very different place, and I know grown-ups always tell you that. But so many things that are part of your world had not yet been invented. The cell phone was first sold commercially in 1973, the personal computer in 1977, the first music CDs in 1982, the first DVDs in 1995, Amazon and eBay made their appearance in 1995, Skype in 2003, and Facebook in 2004, the iPhone in 2007. Everything from how we talk to each other, listened to music, watched movies, or even bought books has changed. When I was in college, we stood in line at our dorm on the weekends to wait for a payphone to call home. Picture phones were the stuff of science fiction. However, when my daughter was at Trinity College in Dublin last semester, we Skyped every Sunday. I could see what new band shirt she had gotten. I could see the spires of Dublin in the window in her dorm room. That was such a change. In college, I was an English major. I typed 20-page essays on a portable typewriter. No mistakes were allowed. You had to retype the whole page. There were no computers. And we listened to music on a cassette machine. We caught up with important news events on television, not on Twitter or Facebook. We bought books in real bookstores, and we read them without the possibility of downloading them to your iPhone or reading them on a Kindle. I think I might envy your choices. Late 60s, as Louis has talked about, were a time of great social change, and I went off to college in the midst of it. I went to Framingham State. Yes, in those days it was a struggle if you came from a large family. I was a good student here, but colleges were, as they are now, expensive. And so I went off to Framingham State. I majored in English and minored in education and art history. That was a combo for the best, clearly the path to great wealth and job security. Not sorry a moment that I did. I loved being a college student during those times. We had great professors and long, passionate discussions about politics and literature and music and art. Of course, the music part which was better, the Beatles or the Stones. There again, dating myself. I also spent a lot of time in Boston where, in addition to discovering museums and libraries, I also got to see Jim Morrison and the Doors at their famous arena concert, and to stand in City Hall Square with a crowd of thousands to see Bobby Orr and the Bruins pick up their first Stanley Cup in 29 years. Let's hope that's going to be repeated. Vietnam protests came to my school, and on May 4th of my junior year, a student was killed at Kent State University during anti-war protests. The event closed colleges throughout the country, and we all learned how serious the times were. I think many in our generation learned that social justice was our calling, and that standing by was not an option. My first job after college was at the Gordon Library at WPI. I became a science librarian. I had graduated with a teaching degree and agonized over which direction I was going to go. And I think I would tell my younger self that that was okay, that you get to do more than one thing in life, and that every experience is a building block to your next stage. If you put passion into what you do, if you care about it, if you work hard at it, it will not have been a mistake or a waste of time. I think you're going to hear that as a theme from all of us. I moved over the years to other jobs. I was a high school English teacher, no booing or hissing, for 5 years at Mahar Regional High School in Orange. I was a librarian at Clark University at the Goddard Library. I began coursework first at Clark for a master's degree, and then for my master's degree in library and information science. I know that sound well. At Simmons College in Boston. In those days, graduate work in the library field included a lot of technology-based training. But here's the thing. Personal computers were still not common, and there was no internet. We were trained in computer labs to use MS-DOS commands, write computer programs in BASIC, and to do reference searches that were graded on the efficiency of our Boolean searches and transmitted on dial-up phones. Again, no internet. Interlibrary loans were sent through a huge teletype machine which spitted out reams of green and white striped paper. I also took coursework in archives. I've always been a history fan, yes, a history nut, and art librarianship at the Museum of Fine Arts. When I left Simmons, I became visual resource librarian at Old Sturbridge Village. I was the one and only visual resource librarian at the village. My job was to bring together all the historic photographs, all the resources in the village, and to be in charge of photographic services department. In those days, there was no ability to do talks that were illustrated if you didn't use actual slides, real physical slides and a slide projector. No PowerPoint. So I worked with the interpreters at the village. During the time I was there, we moved the Bixby House from Barre, Mass. to the village. If any of you have been there, it's sitting down in the farm part of the village. The process involved painstaking photographs of each piece of timber as the house was dismantled, transported on a flatbed truck, and reassembled on its current site. I was part of the documentary team for that. During those years also, I did a lot of traveling. My husband and I have traveled all over Europe. And I learned then something important that I hope you learn. Travel is so important, to get out there and see how other people live, how other people talk, what they take for granted is the most important thing. You can live in a small town, but you don't have to have a small world. And I would say I learned that in those years. But on October 1st, 1990, I accepted the position of library director at the Richard Sugden Library. I've always said this is what I want to be when I grow up. My first job in high school had been at the library, the Sugden Library, and so it was, again, coming full circle. When I started at the library, we were in a small, overcrowded building with one computer and no internet. I jumped headfirst into a building renovation project. I still have my own personal hard hat from that, and a wealth of experience dealing with architects and builders committees. Nearly 25 years later, we are twice the size, We offer a whole range of technologies for the public to use and have become a community center for our small town. Last year, 40,000 people visited the library for meetings or to get movies or art classes or family nights. Library patrons borrowed over 14,000 books and movies through interlibrary loans alone. They downloaded 23,000 free ebooks. You can do this from the library website. They attended over 550 free programs that we offered. We circulated over $900,000 worth of free materials to people. People say you don't need libraries anymore because we have the internet. Well, I'm here to tell you we're actually thriving because of the internet. We level the playing field for everyone who doesn't know how to use a computer, who doesn't have Wi-Fi, or doesn't have the technologies. If you need food stamps, if you need to apply for a job online, and every single job now is applying for online, or just to pick up a movie, you come to the library. And last, I reassure you, I'm getting to the end. There are a couple of pieces of advice I'd offer you. The first one, and I know this will come as a shock considering my profession, but I encourage you to become a reader. And we at the library can help you with that in all the ways that you become a reader. There's been such an explosion in interesting books. The Harry Potter, the Hunger Games, Divergent, all these dystopian novels, or maybe graphic novels. And there has never been more ways to read books. You can on paper, on a Kindle, on a tablet, on your mobile phone. I actually am not against video movies. I think they tell great stories. Same with video games. I'm personally a fan of the Assassin's Creed series because of the historical background. But reading a real story is for life, and I think some of the most interesting people I know. And the last thing is this: to be an activist in your community, wherever you go out to from here. Over the years, I've served on boards here in town. I've written grants. I'm a member of the David Prouty High School with Mr. Beish. I serve in particular as a coach for the high school Envirothon team. We compete tomorrow in the state competition. I am so proud and amazed at these kids. We've slogged through wetlands looking for vernal pools over the years. We've traced stormwater drains, visited local farms, toured St. Joseph Abbey and power plants. We're up against some of the best high schools in the state, and we always do an amazing job. So yes, Prouty can still do that kind of thing. And last, I have to tell you, and this is the kind of advice you always get, is the best judge of a person is what they do when the times are rough, when you come up against something in your life. And I'm going to tell you this morning, this was very hard to come here and talk positively because the town of Spencer yesterday failed to pass 3 overrides. And if you're sitting here in school, you know at least 2 of them, that the computer money didn't come through and that the money for the schools, and more important, the money for the library. I'm facing the fact that I'm going to have to let go almost all of my staff, that I'm going to have to dismantle a library I built for 25 years, and I'm going to have to see students like you who face a town that wouldn't fund what they needed. So I have to be honest and say this is a really hard thing to do, but here's the point. Don't let anybody else define you. You go ahead and find out what it is you need to get out of the solution. And I've talked to some people here today. It's really important. We're going to go on from this, and there are some really important players in this room. We're going to make this better, and we're going to figure out how people can hopefully work together to accomplish that. But meanwhile, I want to thank everyone here for this honor and for sitting so patiently. I know you may be missing a class, but this is still hard to do. So that concludes my remarks. I can answer questions, except that no, I can't renew your library book from here. But thank you. You all set? Okay, thank you.
Okay, before we part, the bell's about to ring any second. I'm sure we're going to get interrupted with a tone. I just personally want to thank, number one, Dr. Malvey. Many of you, I don't know if you've met our superintendent, but Dr. Malvey was present today. Dr. Malvey, give a wave. Mr. Gaudette for just his years and years of service. I don't know another guy that, you know, if you need to know a piece of the history of David Prouty High School, he's your man. He remembers all, and he's a true asset to us, to me here, and I thank you from my heart. And especially Mrs. Mary Baker Wood and Louis R. Coyne and your family. Congratulations. If anybody would like to come up and say hello to them, feel free to do so, but we're going to be going right into first lunch at the sound of the bell. So thank you for your patience, your attention. I appreciate it. So